Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to From Solo to Staff, Hiring Your First Employee. I'm very excited to have you all here with me today. And I'm going to give a minute just for those of us who are joining before I begin. So we'll sit here for exactly 1 minute for anybody who's joining us just a little bit behind or having a little trouble getting in. I'm very excited to get started with you, though, in just a moment. All right, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and bring my slides up and we will get started here. Thank you for those of you who were waiting for us to be ready. All right, everyone should see a nice big logo with the SBDC right there. And in addition, I have my chat open while I'm presenting today. So just know that, you know, I am happy to answer your questions as you post them to the chat. I may not get to them until the end of a particular slide, but I will do my best to answer your questions throughout, and I will be able to stay at the end beyond the scheduled in time for a few minutes to answer a few additional questions if you have them, okay? So very briefly, I always like to start by just giving a quick overview of the Small Business Development Center. We are trusted in the community. Temple has been serving the Philadelphia area since 1983. We are the sole small business development center in the city of Philadelphia. So if you are joining us from Philadelphia today and are interested in one-on-one consulting, which I'll talk about in a minute, we're your place to go. If you are joining us from other places around the state, I'll have something to say about that as well. Our mission is to help businesses and entrepreneurs develop the knowledge they need to make smart decisions and prosper. So you are our business, which means that the Small Business Administration, the Department of Community and Economic Development from the state, and Temple University's Fox School of Business all work together and fund our center. And nationwide, the SBA and the SBDC network create a new business every 26 minutes. They help create a new job every 6 minutes. They generate $100,000 in financing every 8 minutes, and they help businesses generate $100,000 in new sales every 7 minutes. I want to be clear. You are not all leaving here in an hour and a half with $100,000. That is just an average, okay? Here again are those partners that I just mentioned, and this is just a general notice we put up for everybody at the start of our sessions. But I want to quickly give you an overview of what we offer. Does appear like there's a small problem with this slide. I apologize. We offer small business consulting. That's one of our main things. So it's no cost business consulting, working with a person like me, one-on-one to help your business. So you would sign up, tell us a little bit about your business in our client portal, which you can get to by scanning that QR code that's on your screen right now. You meet with our consultants at a location that is mutually agreeable to everybody. So if that's virtual, if that's coming to our office, if that's us coming to your business, whatever works for you and we all agree on. And then we start with whatever is the most pressing matter for your business. And after we've dealt with that, if you want to keep working with us, we focus on things to help your business grow sustainably. This list is a little overlapping. I don't know why, but we can help with everything from business planning to legal formation, management, strategic growth, whole bunch of other things that are listed on this slide. That's one of our main services. Our other main service is our training programs, our training webinars, and our clinics. So no cost weekly virtual training events. And I don't have any to tell you about right now, but you can check our site. Again, there's a QR code there to register for upcoming webinars. But the nice thing about our training programs are they are generally free, and you can attend sessions held by any one of our centers across the state. So speaking of that, here are all the network locations for the SBDC in Pennsylvania. We have a total of 15 centers around the state to serve you. And you can see that each center serves a variety of different counties. Again, Temple specifically serves just Philadelphia County. And we got a question in the chat from John Thomas and also one from Imitaz. So this session is being recorded. I believe it will be shared with you tomorrow, and it'll be available to you for a limited period of time after the session takes place. John, you asked about what is a clinic? And a clinic is generally kind of larger offering that we make. So one example of a clinic is we have a tax clinic, which helps business owners, small business owners prepare their business taxes. And for that, we partner with an accountant, and we partner with the city of Philadelphia to refer clients into that clinic. And certainly, John, I'd encourage you to stick around at the end. If you want to hear more about our clinics, you could ask me questions then. You're also asking if we do any meet and greets on site in Philly. Yes, we do a number of events throughout the year, although they are more limited since the pandemic. But we do a number of events. We have a Meet the Lenders event where business owners can meet banks and other lending organizations. We had an open house at the SBDC earlier this year, and we will continue to do things like that. The best way to know about them is to be signed up for a newsletter. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what I call the People Leadership Series. So you signed up today for solo to staffed, hiring your first employee. And I want to be very transparent and clear with you that today's session is a pilot of a program that we want to offer. So I'm really going to be interested in your feedback at the end of the day. Our hope is to eventually expand this offering to provide a number of HR-related trainings, which will really take you through the whole journey from hiring to managing to keeping or firing employees. And so today is focused really just on hiring. But my goal, my experience is I have a lot of experience in HR, and I'd like to share that with the network. So today's hiring session sort of fits in this journey. We started with hiring because it seems to be a topic that's really on small business owners' minds. They want to understand how to do it. They know they need to do it if they want to grow often. But the full journey for me really starts with talking about the culture you want to create in your company. What do you want people who work at your company to feel about your company and feel about working for you? We're not starting there because it's in some ways a kind of higher level thinking thing. We're going to start with hiring. We'll have another session in the fall about onboarding people successfully. We're not really going to touch on that much today. And then we'll talk about how you manage people, how you review people and do compensation, and also how you retain people, okay? But that's sort of where things fit today. All right, let's keep moving. So today's roadmap, we're going to have a kind of topic overview. I'm going to talk about hiring in big, broad terms. I'm then going to talk about some legal and compliance issues around hiring. I want to be very clear, and I'll reiterate it when I get to that session, that I'm not a lawyer, okay? So I am always going to caveat the things I say with that statement, and I'm going to encourage you, if you have a complicated hiring or firing or whether or not someone is allowed legally to work in this country question, you should talk to an attorney. And the SBDC does have lists of attorneys we're aware of or free legal clinics in the city that we can refer you to. If you reach out to us, we'd be happy to provide some of those. I'm going to spend a little time on what I like to call a 1, 2, 3, 4 action roadmap. You're going to see that when we get to it, but basically it's a series of steps and actions you can take to move successfully from where you are today to getting to the point of hiring. And then you're going to get a workbook after this session. That workbook is a draft. I do feel that is powerful and useful, and it'll help you really think through hiring in a concrete and methodical way. But it is a draft. You are the first group of people who are going to get it. And I'm excited for you to receive it and give me your feedback on it. But I'll walk you through it a little bit today, what's in it and how to use it. And then we'll have a little time where you actually can like download that file when I share it with you in the chat, look through it, ask some questions, or even begin working on the first page. And then we'll have some wrap up time where I can answer final questions and kind of tell you about what else is going on and gather some more feedback from you. So that's our agenda for today. And before we dive in a little more, I want to open up a quick poll for everybody. So please take a minute and just answer this question. When will you hire? And I'm interested in where you are in the process of hiring your first employee, because there are about 25 of us here today, and I'd like to get a sense of, where people are in their hiring journey, okay? So I'm going to give this like another 10 or 15 seconds. I see about half of you responded, but I'd love to get as many answers as possible. So I'll just sit here and vamp for a second while you all think about this poll or find the poll on your screen and respond to it. And it's not a test, there's not a correct answer, so don't agonize over it. And there are also no prizes. Nobody's winning a car. Unfortunately, I'm not Oprah. All right, about 2/3 of you have responded. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and here are the results. So let's just talk through these for a minute. So about 20% of you say, I'm not close, I'm just interested in learning early. I love that. I think that being prepared is always good. A little less than 1/3 of you said, I'm thinking about hiring, but probably not until next year, so 2027. So you're like maybe 6 to 18 months away from hiring somebody. This is a good time to start thinking about that, though, because some of the advice I give today, and some of the advice I might give you if we met one-on-one, would be that you want to give yourself some time before you hire. Some of you say I need to hire before the end of the year. Another group of you say I need to hire as soon as possible. That was the second, or that was tied for the most popular answer. And so we'll definitely have some stuff for you today so that you can start moving in the direction of hiring before the end of the year or hiring as soon as possible. Hiring as soon as possible, I just want to tell you, like it is difficult to hire well and hire quickly. So that's something I want you to consider, even though you may feel like you're under a lot of pressure or you may have just lost a key person and you need to replace them. Just remember, like in life, you can often do something well or you can do something fast, and it's hard to do both. And then one of you said, or a few of you said, I already have one or more employees. Well, what are you doing here? This was called solo to staffed. No, that's totally fine. I'm actually happy to have you here. And I'm guessing that if you have one or more employees already, but you are here, you are perhaps thinking you want to make sure you're compliant, or you're thinking, hey, maybe I hired these people and they aren't quite what I hoped I would get. I want to figure out how to do better in the future. So, welcome. We're happy to have all of you. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that poll result and let's check and see if we have any questions. All right, some people have said they're not sure here in the response in the chat. I guess you had some trouble with the poll. So that's great. And we will talk very briefly, John, about independent contractors here. So don't worry, we'll be getting to that. All right, so again, your goals today are going to be to determine whether you're ready to hire, define the role you need, understand employer responsibilities, and then understand what's involved in recruiting, interviewing, and just a tiny touch on maybe preparing for onboarding, okay, which will be a session we do in the fall. So the hiring decision, let's talk about that for a second. The real questions you are asking here are, do you need an employee or another solution, right? So remember, hiring is something you should do to solve a business problem, not to create one, okay? So it's not simply like, can I find someone? The question is actually, what am I trying to solve? And is an employee the best way to solve it? And so I'll say a lot of first-time employers, people who are where many of you are right now, or getting close to where many of you are, they think that they need to hire because they're tired, they're behind on things, or they're frustrated. And those feelings can all be real, right? You can be tired for sure. Early on in business ownership, it's a tiring experience. You can feel like you're not getting back to clients as fast as you want to, or you can feel like you're having to turn some clients down, and that may be frustrating. But just having those feelings is not enough to justify the payroll, the supervision time, the compliance obligations, the time you have to spend training someone, and the ongoing responsibility that you assume for another person's work when you hire, okay? So, for example, when you're defining a business problem and solving it, here are a few examples. Like if you are having trouble getting back to customers reliably, and you have a standard process for doing that, like you have the same email you always send back to a customer, um, or you have a series of steps you always send back, or you always start by giving a customer a call and asking them the same 8 or 10 questions. Um, then, you can probably hire someone who can repeat that process that you have in place reliably if you find the right person. Um, on the other hand, like if you do a lot of work all the time, you have lots of work coming in, but you're able, the relationships are maintained by you, and you've kind of got your full roster of clients. It's just that you're spending lots and lots of time, say, invoicing them or setting meetings and appointments. Like maybe you can hire someone who will take care of that setting meetings and appointments and handling like invoicing so that you have more time to actually work and bill clients. That's a good choice too, right? So the idea here is you're going to want to do things that improve your workflow or free up time for you to focus on actual billable work. And I will say that often a bad hire can come from trying to solve several problems at once with several vague positions. So when you say, I want someone who can do sales, bookkeeping, social media, customer service, errands, and watch my kids, that's not really a good job description. That's a very unclear role. And it's probably going to keep disappointing you and the employee. Okay. So hiring isn't a way to like get out of not having a clarity about how your business works. Because if you don't have clarity about how your business works, it's going to be hard for you to supervise that person and determine whether they're working in your business correctly. So let me ask a question now for all of you, and I'm looking for answers in the chat. If you hired someone tomorrow, what specific business problem would you expect them to solve for you? If you hired someone tomorrow, what specific business problem would you expect them to solve for you? Sales and marketing leads, increased production. Those are really solid answers, by the way, Tamika and Dina. I own a cleaning business and want to take on more houses without filling my personal schedule more. So that would be like increased production, sales and installers. Yeah, so all of you are kind of looking either at more sales or more orders, or speeding up a piece of your thing. Thor here said following up on invoices, purchase order follow-up, organization, payroll. Okay. So Deborah, that's interesting to me that you say payroll because you don't have any employees potentially. So, payroll typically is when you have a lot of employees. So payroll is a great one, and we may talk about how that's a thing that you might actually outsource. All right, thanks for those answers. Let's keep moving. So signs you're ready to hire. Let's just touch on this, right? Here are some things that you want to see, or perhaps don't want to see, but will be signs that you might be ready to hire. You want to see that you've got a consistent workload, right? So you want to have regular customers. You want to have work that needs to be done on an ongoing basis. If you're going to hire an employee, right? When I say an employee here, I am talking about a person who's on your payroll for whom you are paying an employer's share of taxes, and we'll get to that more, right? It's not a contractor. It's not a person you're bringing in a little here and there. It's not a person you're paying straight cash to, and so you've got to have consistent work. You've got to have revenue that supports the payroll. So in other words, you have to look at your books at the end of each month and say, I've got a couple $1,000s at the end of each month left over consistently as profit. Not that my bank balance is staying at like $4,000 or $5,000, that like each month at the end of the month, there's $4,000 or $5,000 more in my bank account. Okay. Because you're going to have to pay that person. You're going to have to meet payroll. So if you don't have the revenue to support payroll, hiring someone's going to go very badly. They're not going to keep coming if you stop paying them, typically. Um, and then again, being busy is not the same as being ready to hire, right? A short-time rush, a one-time event, a temporary backlog, that doesn't necessarily mean an employee, right? And the revenue thing, right? Like you got to have enough to pay an hourly wage or salary. The third thing is important work isn't getting done. So, and that's a little different from having things you like and dislike doing. All right. So if you have a list of things in your business that you don't like doing, but you have the time to do them, um, this may not be a sign that you actually need to hire. You might want to hire. But a good first hire often handles recurring work that affects your customer's experience or sales follow-up or production or scheduling or just like administrative things happening reliably, right? So if things like that are not happening reliably, it might be good to hire somebody. And the fourth is growth is being limited. So that doesn't mean that you just have this crazy idea of like, oh, we're going to grow a bunch. It means that you have business opportunities coming in right now that you cannot pursue because you do not have the time or some other type of capacity. So if you as the owner are identifying revenue generating work that can't be done at the moment because you're a bottleneck or because you don't have somebody to help you do something, that's a sign that you could be ready to support hiring somebody. Okay. So let me ask for all of you, is there anybody who has one of these things happening? Do you know that you have a consistent workload? Do you know that you have revenue to support your payroll? Do you have important work that's not getting done? Do you have growth that's being limited? Tell me from 1 to 4, how many of these 4 things do you have? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Just put the number in the chat for me. Because this is a real baseline. Okay, 2, 1, 3, 1, 1, 4, 2. All right. So if you have 4, I mean, I think you're definitely in a position to hire. If you have 1, might not be time to hire right now. If you have 3, probably getting towards wanting to hire, unless the one thing you're missing is revenue to support payroll. Right? So if you have 2 or 3 of these, I would tell you 2 or 3 of these, and one of them is revenues to support payroll, you could think about hiring. All 4 of them, you should definitely be moving towards hiring. 1 or 2 of them, but not revenue to support it, maybe don't hire. All right. So let's talk about some alternatives then. Because for some of you who just said you were like a 1 or a 0, or if you're at a 2, but you don't have the money to hire, support the payroll, let's talk about alternatives to hiring for a minute. So this is really about controlling risks, right? Hiring an employee is a tool, but it's only one tool. And there's a lot of risk that comes along with it because it's going to take a lot of time. And typically, it's going to cost the most money to solve your problem. Having a full-time employee or a part-time employee is going to cost a lot of money. And so, JD, I just saw you mentioned, what about part-time employees? Yeah, like you can hire a part-time employee, but again, it goes back to you have to have the revenue to support the salary for a part-time person, right? And you can often start before you have a part-time person with one of these options. So, automation. Automation is a way that you can reduce repetitive work, right? So if you are spending a lot of time emailing back and forth with potential customers about trying to find a time to set a meeting, because that can take forever. All right. You could hire a contractor or an outsourced virtual assistant or a part-time office person or a full-time salesperson. But you could also just try finding a tool that helps make that easier. So, for example, all the consultants at the SBDC use a website called Calendly to help schedule all our meetings. And what we do when you go to set an appointment with me, I have my Calendly link in my email signature for all my clients. And if they want to schedule an appointment with me, they click on that link and it pulls up my calendar on a website. It automatically knows all the other times during the day that I have meetings scheduled, and it knows the times that I'm available to have meetings, and it shows my clients all the times they could schedule a meeting with me in the next 30 days, and they just do it. They look at their calendar and pick a time. All I have to do is make sure my calendar is up to date with my personal stuff, and my calendar is up to date with the days and times I'm working. Everything else is automated. Okay, so that's an example of automation. Can I please repeat that name again? Yeah, I'll even put it in the chat. There are many versions of calendar software, but this is Calendly. Microsoft also has a built-in thing if you use like the online Microsoft Office called Microsoft Bookings. There are other options out there, so please don't blindly just go to Calendly. There are things about Calendly I actually don't love, but it is the system that we use in our office, and it is an example of automation. Contractors. Contractors might be appropriate when the business needs really specialized expertise for a little while, or it has a defined product, or you're looking for a specific result rather than ongoing supervised labors. So good examples of things you could contract for are a bookkeeper, a web designer, a photographer, someone to write a grant, an HR consultant like me to make an employee manual or help you develop, a hiring process. I want to be careful. I don't want to suggest that making someone, calling them a contractor makes them a contractor. Okay. So, worker classification, contractor is an IRS term. You want to be careful there when you hire a contractor that they're truly a contractor and you're not just paying someone as a contractor when they're really an employee. And that is a thing to really talk about with a lawyer. So I want to stress that. But things about like the relationship between you and that employee, how much control you, the employer or the business, have over that employee's work and how they get it done, the financial independence they have, and whether the work is a key ongoing part of the business or temporary thing project. Okay, just be aware that contractors are a great way to get small projects done, but there is some gray area there legally. You can't get into trouble. And then outsourcing is just, when you have another company handle a function. So lots of people outsource their payroll. They go to a payroll company and they just send over the employees' hours and rates of pay, every other week or every month or every week. And the company does the payroll and issues the checks and handles the taxes and draws the money out. So outsourcing like bookkeeping, marketing support is another one. You might just go to a company that does social media. I mean, many of us have to do our own social media. Many of us wish that as soon as we had money, we could outsource our social media. That doesn't necessarily mean hiring somebody to be a full-time employee to do your social media, because the average small business doesn't have enough social media to keep a person busy 40 hours a week or even 20 hours a week. But you might go to a company and you might have someone who every Monday schedules all your posts for the week or something. And another example of this is like seasonal companies may need to sort of outsource to a company for temporary staffing, right? Staffing agencies. And I think another practical point I want to make here is the question when you're thinking about alternatives to hiring isn't always what's the cheapest thing to do today, but it's what solution fits the work you need done, the risk that it is to your business, the budget you have, and the level of control that you want over the business need you have, okay? I see Thor here just saying that they outsource a lot of services, so that's great. Let me ask another question here at this point. Of these alternatives, can any of you type in the chat if you are sitting here going, oh, actually, I think this might help solve my problem? So can you tell me if you think automation, contracting, outsourcing, or part-time help might be your solution and not actually hiring an employee? Part-time and contractors, part-time, contracting and automation, automations and AI. Yeah, AI is definitely an example of this. Okay, great. So I see a lot of you are looking for part-time help, and that's great. So part-time is still potentially an employee. So let's go on and let's talk about defining a position, okay? So when we talk about defining the position, really what we want to talk about is laying out a clear understanding of what a person hired into a job is going to do. All right. So posting, I need someone to help me in my business, will get replies, and you could talk to people and you could hire somebody. But what will likely happen at the end of that process is that the person you hired won't know exactly what they're supposed to do. You won't be clear on what you expect them to be doing. You might be wildly mismatched on those things, and it may not work out. And the less defined a position is, the greater the likelihood that that happens, okay? So I always like to design or define a role, a job, before I even write the job description, okay? Because the first question always should be, what is the business need? What is the problem you're trying to solve, okay? And you should be specific, because the more specific you can be, the clearer then you can define the position and once you hire, understand if the person in the role is working. So let me give you an example of a business need that is too vague. Anybody want to guess, like, what would be a business need that you have that's too vague, not clear? Just give me some examples in the chat. Manager. Need a cleaner. Need a cleaner might actually be pretty good. Um, Administration, grow revenue. Yeah, those are pretty vague. I mean, they feel clear, but they're actually sort of vague. So another one is help me be less busy, right? Like that's a very vague thing. But if you want to be clear about what will help you be less busy, so if you said, I need someone to manage appointment scheduling, handle customer follow-up, complete intake paperwork with new customers so that I can spend more time on sales leads that are valuable and delivering services I can bill for. Okay. So core responsibilities, let's talk about those for a second. Those are the major categories of work the employee will do. Okay. When you are designing or defining a position, you should list out the things that you want to have that employee do as part of their job. Now, some people like to split this up and say, like, these will be the daily tasks, these will be the weekly tasks, these will be the monthly tasks. But what I like is I like for employers to just write down a list of 5 to 7 major things that they want an employee to do. That's parts of the workflow at your business that this employee is going to partially or completely take off of your plate, okay? And I want to put a big warning here that a first hire, first employee often becomes a catch-all for everything the owner doesn't like to do or everything they feel behind on. And there's a natural tendency to try to offload a bunch of stuff when you're stressed like that. But that can make it really hard because then the more scattered the role is, the more knowledge and experience and expertise the hire that you find needs. So it becomes harder to recruit. It takes more time to train a person to a bunch of different things. It takes more time to evaluate a person on doing a bunch of different things. And somebody who's doing a bunch of different things all the time, someone who loves doing 20 different things all the time is very rare and hard to find and is valuable in the marketplace and wants to be paid well. So it becomes hard to retain someone who's doing too many things, okay? If everything in your business is considered essential, if every single responsibility you give to a person is essential, then nothing can be prioritized or given the highest level of scrutiny by you. So really try to set that list no more than 5 to 7 things, and also try to see that those things are related to each other or related to the same set of skills. Okay. So then let's talk about success measures. When you're defining a role, what I like to do is I like to ask, what do you think it's going to look like for a new employee in this position to be successful after a month, after 2 months, and after 3 months? Okay. So, you're going to be training someone during that period of time. And so you're going to want to be able to understand that they're proceeding along a training path in a way that makes sense. And at the end of 3 months, you should have a good understanding of whether that person can perform the job well. And I often tell people, like, you want to have a probationary period with a new hire, probably 90 days, where you can figure out in that time if they're up to the job, if you've been able to train them. And if you haven't, it's better at that point to acknowledge a failure on either or both sides, that it's not working, and have somebody step out of a role or take someone out of a role if they're not working and go and look for somebody new. The last thing here is required skills. So required skills, again, you want to be very thoughtful about listing your required skills. They should truly be things that a person must have to be able to start the job, right? Things that they have to already know how to do when they show up. You're going to need to train them to do the details of the job. You may need to train them on specific skills related to the way your business operates. But really be clear that, like, if you are requiring a skill, make sure it's a skill they're going to need and use in the role, and make sure that they must have it to start. And then you can have preferred skills, right? Things that it would be great if people already knew how to do, but you're willing to train them on. So let me give you an example, right? If you're going to hire for an administrative assistant whose job it is to respond to client inquiries and prepare documents to send out with quotes and follow up on the phone, well, then they should be required to know how a phone works. They should be required to know how to use email. They should be required to know Microsoft Office or Google Suite or whatever software your office is using generally, right? But you might not need them to know exactly how to make an invoice in QuickBooks, or exactly how you make an invoice using a template in Word. You may not need them to know exactly how the back end, voicemail recording system for your voice phone system works, or how the dial tree is set up, because you'll teach them those things. Now, if they happen to know those already, will it save you time bringing that person on board, and could it be beneficial? Yeah, absolutely. All right, so thinking about this job you want to hire for. In the chat, I'm interested again in seeing some responses from you. But what's one responsibility that is truly essential from day one for a new hire for you? So, like, what's one thing you want to have a new hire do, and what is one required skill that you need to have them show up with to be able to do that? While you are starting to chat, I'm going to look a little bit. I've seen some of the conversation flowing here. I'm seeing an interesting free-flowing conversation here around AI assistants, especially like voice AI assistants. I agree that they are not quite at a level yet where they're not going to chase some customers away. All right, let's look at some of your, okay, listening. Okay. Common sense. I hear you on that, and that to me speaks to a frustration you may have had in attempting to hire or work with, a contractor perhaps. I want to encourage you to think beyond like just listening or think beyond just common sense. Like, what specifically are the things where you think someone hasn't demonstrated common sense where you want them to be clear? I would think about that. Um, Attention to detail for packing orders. Yeah, that's really important, right? People skills, going into people on their phones, running training for a contract. Oh, this is a real specific thing. So this is great. Like you need a trainer who has specific certifications. Great. Um, Willingness to learn, honesty, a required credential. Yeah, integrity, energy, ready to get to work more. Okay. I like all these. I want us to think about, and we will, when we talk about the workbook, we'll talk about how to make some of these more specific, okay? But that's defining the position. And then once you've defined the position and written a job description, the next thing you're going to move into is the actual hiring process. So let me give you a real high level overview of this, right? When you go to hire, there are basically going to be a series of stages you go through. You're going to start by recruiting. So you want to go and figure out where you're going to put the word out about the job and what information you're going to share about the position. In this day and age, like sharing a description of the company, a description of what the job will be expected to do, the required and preferred skills for the job. And I always nowadays encourage people, even when you feel like what you have to offer is not a lot in terms of salary or hourly wage, I encourage all employers to post what the pay range for the job will be and be honest about it because it's going to save everybody involved a lot of time and frustration. If you don't post a salary or if you don't post an hourly wage with your job, you will get people who apply who expect the pay to be much higher than it is. And you may get a significant part of the way down your interview process, depending on where you have a conversation about pay, and spend a lot of time talking to a person who ultimately is never going to work for you because you can't pay them. So I really encourage you, just be honest about what you can pay. And, if you get no responses that you want to interview, then you got to go back and think about raising the pay. But at least you will know that everybody who is responding has seen the pay and understands what it is. And if you post a range, as many jobs do, but there's realistically not a chance that you're going to start someone at the top of that range, be honest about that too. So you could say this pay is going to be $15 to $20 an hour. Most new hires will start between $15 and $17 an hour, right? That would be an example of posting what the pay range, possible pay is, but being clear about where people start. All right. So that's part of recruiting. Then there's interviewing, right? So when you go and you've recruited, you're going to look at everything that's come in. All right. And so long as you've done a good job recruiting, you've made good decisions about where the right kind of people are going to see the opportunity, what information you have to provide, and how you're going to screen the applications. So if you set up a standard process for reviewing all the applications you get, what information are you collecting? What are you asking for from people? How are you looking at it? How are you fairly and equitably evaluating everybody? Then you should come up with a list of a certain number of candidates you want to interview. I always tell you, don't interview someone who, when you look at the resume, you know you're not going to hire. And don't interview everybody unless you only have a very small pool and everybody is someone you might hire. But you've got to be realistic. So typically you want to do 2 rounds of interviews. First interview is typically going to be on the phone. And that's where you just are trying to learn like whether the applicant understands the role, can do the work, are likely to be reliable. Initial interviews should always be highly structured. You should be asking the same questions in the same order. You should have a sense of what kind of answers you're looking for, what kind of answers would be satisfactory. And you should also have had someone look at the questions you're going to ask and make sure that you're not asking anything illegal We will touch on that. But again, I'm not a lawyer, but we will touch on it. If you're asking kind of the same questions across all the interviews, then you're going to have a standard basis for comparing all the candidates when you're done and to decide who comes in for a final interview. Final interview, I tend to like to have be in person. If you have a home-based business, you might not do it at your house. You might do it like at a coffee shop. But I encourage an interview in person because the way someone shows up in person and the way someone shows up on the phone and the way someone shows up over email are all different things. And you're going to have to work with this person. And so seeing them in person is going to help you screen out potential issues. We also live in a world where like people have gone through a whole interview process and they get to the on-site interview and they go, oh, well, actually, I don't live here. And that may be a problem for you, right? If you're hiring a remote person, just some kind of situation where you probably interview them face to face. But you wanted to do 2 rounds of interviews. And the other thing I'll stress is in a second interview, it's really good to understand some of the exact things an employee might do and try to do some kind of a role play scenario or even like a very small sample piece of work. Something short and brief that you could send like a file you want someone to analyze quickly or a set of instructions to prepare something. It shouldn't take too much time for them. Some places even now pay people to do these sort of example work things. They pay them for like an hour of their time. But I really find that role plays or like small work scenarios are one of the best ways of evaluating whether or not someone can actually do what you want to have them do because you're having them do it. Once you've done all of that, then you're at the selection point, right? And so when you select somebody, this is where you really want to sit and compare. I like a scorecard, again, something that's standardized, a set of questions for you to think through about each candidate, something that will help you avoid like just picking someone because they're really charismatic and outgoing or because they have a personal similarity to you. Not that these things are unimportant, but that they can sometimes overcome other clear, obvious signs that someone isn't going to work. Okay. And then I put on here prepare for day 1. Again, I said we're not really going to talk much about onboarding today, but there are some things that have to be done before an employee starts in terms of paperwork and payroll setup, making sure that they have a workspace or the tools they need to do the job or the clothes they need to do the job, that you figured out what their schedule is going to be. And then, you just want to be clear about like having a training plan, having expectations for them. That part really falls a little more into onboarding. And just know like a really disorganized first day sends a message that the business is not ready to manage an employee. And, look, in my life, I had a job I went to once where I quit after the first day because I realized it wasn't going to work. Okay. All right. So let me ask another quick question here before we move on. Of these steps for hiring, which one do you think an employer is most likely to rush? Do you think an employer is likely to rush recruiting, interview, selection, or preparing for somebody to start? And there's no right answer here. I want to be clear. I see a lot of people saying preparing to start, couple recruiting. Nobody, oh, well, one person said interviewing. Okay, I was just about to say nobody said interviewing. I think people often rush recruiting and preparing to start. People usually are good about spending at least some time interviewing. I think people often look back and wish they had spent a little more time interviewing or had done more than one interview. But I think it's more likely people look back and go, wow, I really wish I had spent more time thinking about where I was going to post this job to get good candidates, or that I had waited a little longer to see if I got a few more applications because I started interviewing people and I didn't really like anybody, but I wanted someone soon, so I just started interviewing right away. People are generally good about selecting because you usually have a pretty strong sense, a gut feeling. And if you use a gut feeling and a sort of like tool to standardize the way we review people, those two things together are a really nice combination. But then preparing to start is a place where people also rush all the time. They actually go out and post a job before they've really defined the job. And so then they hire and they ask that person, well, when can you start? And they start them as soon as they can, and they haven't necessarily taken that time to set a start time. So I often say, like, even when you have somebody and you've identified them and they're ready to go, like telling them you want them to start in 2 or 4 weeks is usually, provided they're not so desperate for a job themselves that they can't wait 2 or 4 weeks, but that gives you a little time to just look over everything you need to get started. Okay. So let's talk now a little bit about becoming an employer. When you become an employer, you're going to have new legal and administrative responsibilities, and it's going to be important for you to know when you need professional guidance. So let me just be real clear about a legal boundary here, right? Everything I'm doing right now is educational. It is not legal advice. It is not tax advice. I'm not offering you individualized human resources compliance advice. So I'm just trying to help you recognize the main categories of responsibility so you know what you need to confirm before hiring. And here, if you have specific legal questions, it may be that I tell you need to, consult with an attorney or a CPA or a payroll provider, insurance person, okay? But just understand that becoming an employer changes the business, right? A small business owner who's a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, they're used to making quick decisions on their own. Once an employee is involved, the business takes on responsibilities for wages, for paying taxes for their employees, for workplace safety, for non-discrimination, for keeping records beyond the records you kind of generally keep. You have to keep, records about that employee. If you talk to them about problems, you have to verify their eligibility to be employed. And sometimes, depending on how complex your business is and how well compensated, both in terms of salary and benefits an employee is, you may be taking on responsibilities for benefits or managing leave things like there are federal laws about leave. There are Philadelphia laws about sick leave. There are rules about following, and paying out vacation time. So just depending on the size and circumstances, right? One employee can trigger a whole bunch of new paperwork and reporting requirements for you. And, compliance isn't just about avoiding penalties, all right? It's about protecting your relationship with employees. Employees want to know that they're being paid correctly, they're being treated fairly, that when they're brought into a workplace, it has basic systems, right? A well-prepared employer looks credible, and their employees are less confused, and everybody's happier. So, just broadly, right? Let's talk now a little bit about some additional employer responsibilities that you take on. I'm going to walk through these just at a very high level. I want to be clear about that, okay? There's a lot of detail behind these. You're going to take on payroll taxes. So an employer generally can't pay an employee like a vendor. When you bring someone as a vendor, you say, "Hey, I need you to do this work for me for $500. They do something, they send an invoice for $500, you pay them. When you have an employee, they're on payroll. You put them into a payroll system. You have to register with the IRS, with the federal government, and with the state typically, and with the city, if you're in a city that has a wage tax, to collect and remit taxes for that employee. And so some portion of every single employee's paycheck now is going to be taken out and held and tracked and sent to the federal government, the state government, city government, wherever, as tax. In addition, as an employer, you pay a portion of tax towards employees at the federal level for their Social Security in the future and their Medicare in the future. All right, so that's about 7%, give or take, above their salary that you pay as an employer. So you have to track all of that, or you have to hire a payroll service to do it for you. And the IRS publishes a big, nasty, scary guide to how to do this. But the way most people handle it is they hire a payroll company, or they set up a payroll service like within QuickBooks where they put in hours and QuickBooks figures out the rest of those things. You really want to look at that, okay? You're also responsible for workers' compensation. So Pennsylvania, if you're in Pennsylvania, it requires that workers' compensation coverage be in place for employers with one or more employees, and that includes part-time and full-time people. We're not going to talk about exclusions. There are some, but you really, if you're going to hire someone, you need to go out and look for workers' compensation insurance. Look at what your options are. Talk to someone who sells that insurance. They're going to have to understand the type of work that a person is doing because based on the type of work someone is doing, the rate of the insurance you have to pay will vary. So, insurance is very different for someone who sits all day as a remote employee in their own home working than it is from someone, for example, who is a circus performer or an underwater welder or a police officer. It all has to do with the chance that they may be hurt while working. That's what workers' compensation insurance is for, okay? And you have to be clear that when the employee starts, that coverage is in place. Another thing is unemployment insurance, okay? Unemployment insurance is different from workers' compensation. Every state, by and large, and every job, by and large, has you pay out to the state and take a small amount out from the employee's paycheck, but pay as an employer into unemployment compensation. And that is a pool of money that all the companies in the state are paying into that helps then when an employee is laid off, paying their unemployment, right? And your unemployment compensation, your unemployment insurance rate is set by the state each year, and it'll vary based on how many people you lay off and how many people who lose their job at your workplace through no fault of their own are being paid out by the system. The state tracks that, and your rate will go up and down. So, like construction companies often have higher rates because people are being laid off when jobs finish. If you're an employer that hires one person and that person stays with you and you don't fire them over several years, your insurance rate will drop because you're not really drawing into that pool. So just understand that that is something that exists. And down the road, when we talk about firing people, we will talk about like how to make sure if you fire someone for cause that their unemployment benefits aren't charged to your company. And then this thing, I-9 and required postings. Let me just touch on this for a minute. So, an I-9 is an employment verification form that the United States Immigration Service has people complete. It is given to employees before, sorry, let me stop. It is not given to employees before you make them an offer. You only ask for an I-9 after someone has accepted a job. You can ask them if they're legally qualified to work in the United States during a search process, but you don't confirm it until you've offered them the job and they've accepted. And if someone can't complete an I-9 form, you are not supposed to allow them to work or pay them. You can have big, big, big fines, especially in this current moment. All right, there are specific documents that people have to bring to you either before they start or on their first day of work to prove that they have the legal right to work in the country. There are a lot of different forms they can show, and the form is fairly clear about how to do this. There is a degree to which you can outsource this also if you're working with a payroll company, they can do it for you. And then just understand that the Department of Labor, depending on the type of employees you have, you may be required to have some kind of a billboard in your workplace or a notice board or a posting area where you post required notices. And there are any number of things that you might be required to post. That would be a level of detail we can't go in here today because it'll depend on your business, what you have to have posted at, okay? All right, I know that was a very high level, but I hope it was helpful. Let's talk a little now about your compliance requirements around interviewing legally, okay? When you're asking job-related questions in an interview, these are some of the safest questions you can ask, right? They should be able to explain, and by they, I mean you. When you make a list of interview questions, you should be able to explain why each question helps determine whether the applicant can perform the role. So like good questions focus on their work experience, their skills, when they're available to start relative to when you need someone to start, their ability to perform essential job functions. You can ask them questions that require them to demonstrate problem solving. You can ask them questions that require them to demonstrate or talk about their customer service skills. Um, you can ask them questions about their reliability, things like, do you have a working car to get to work? Or this job requires that you travel around and we don't provide a car. Do you have access to a car that is yours? Um, reliably? Or are you able to arrive here by the start time each day at 8 a.m. using public transit? Um, you can ask them for examples of their past behavior in other jobs, broadly, right? You can't ask them like, hey, tell me about a shitty time you broke the law at work. But you will be surprised if you ask an open-ended question, like the things employees will just tell you. And so you want to avoid questions that drift into people's personal life, their family responsibilities, their medical history, anything about their religion or their age or their race, their ethnicity, where they're from originally, whether they're disabled, whether they are pregnant or thinking about becoming pregnant, whether they're married, who they're married to, what the sex or gender of that person they're married to is. All of those things I just listed out broadly are protected characteristics, right? Um, and so, um, you know, the difference here is subtle sometimes. So the difference between asking about a job requirement and asking about someone's personal life. Let me give the example of a job that requires evening and Saturday work. An employer could ask, are you available to work the schedule listed for this position? And make sure that the position lists that they have to be available to work Saturdays and weekends. An employer really can't ask whether you have children, whether you have childcare arrangements, whether you're at a mosque on Fridays and Saturdays or a synagogue, whether you're at a church on Sunday, right, or Saturday. Um, those are the kinds of things that shouldn't be asked. You shouldn't really ask if someone has a spouse who would approve of the work schedule. You're only asking if they can be there for the work schedule, right? If the job requires lifting a certain amount, like say someone is working at Home Depot and they're going to have to be able to lift 100 pounds repeatedly for hours, it's all right to ask, with or without a reasonable accommodation, can you lift 100 pounds repeatedly for several hours? But you can't ask them like, do you have a bad back? Do you have a medical diagnosis? Do you have any past injuries? Now, people may volunteer these things, and they're allowed to if they're answering and volunteering the information in the course of answering a question. And consistent documentation matters. So that's why these consistent questions are important. Taking good notes, or having like checked lists where you can check off things that people certify. Another thing you want to be very careful of is when you're taking notes around a hire, typically you're going to be retaining those notes for some period of time. You want to invite, or you want to avoid writing things that may be problematic. So, like you don't want to write or say in an email or in a text or really even in person, well, that person seemed old, or I don't know that they're really our type of person, or I think that family situation is going to be difficult. Those are the kinds of things that shouldn't play a part in a hire. Now, an example of how you could talk about, a job, you need someone to start in the next 3 months who will be available every week for the first 6 months of training because you have a specific series of things you need to do. If you have someone who comes in and tells you that they are, 4 months pregnant and they're going to be giving birth sometime in that 6 months, you can tell them, can you guarantee that you will be at work every day for the first 6 months? And they may reasonably say that, they're not going to meet that requirement, but it's not specifically because they're pregnant, okay? Pregnancy is a really big one. Pregnancy, race, gender, these kinds of things are real traps that you want to work very hard to avoid. You don't want to, even though your intentions may be good, give the appearance of having bad intentions, okay? And going into my next thing, like, um, just because you're going through this, if you're unsure about a question, like that's where you should ask for help, okay? So I'm going to mention some sources of help right now, and then I'll pause and look at what's coming in on the chat, all right? So here are some sources of help. A certified public accountant, a CPA, an attorney, a payroll provider, an outside human resources consultant isn't on this list, but is another choice. Temple SBDC can provide education, but we don't provide legal advice, right? But like if you have questions about your interview questions or your interview process, I really want to encourage you like to think about reaching out and getting some help, okay? And really like normalize asking for help before you hire. Like so many small business owners try to solve their employer compliance questions like informally. They ask another owner what they did, they download a template, they copy a process from a prior job. None of those things guarantee that the process is correct. The law changes on these questions. I think it's really good. It's worth the time to have a lawyer in your life who is a, employment lawyer who takes an hour and looks over your interview questions for a role and tells you they're legal, looks over your rubric for assessing candidates and tells you it's acceptable. Okay. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And if you're kind of at a loss, start with coming to us. Start with coming to the SBDC, and we can direct you out to other people because we'll know what we can't give you advice on. Okay, so let me just pause here. We are going to go into our roadmap, but I want to briefly just look at some of the things that were in here. Yeah, there are a lot of questions that employers ask. I see some conversation here about, I've had job interviews where they ask questions that aren't okay. Yeah, not surprising. Employers ask questions that aren't okay all the time. And especially these big companies, they have lots of like questions that they've had teams of lawyers fret about that they think get around things. Like you'll see this a lot. People won't ask how old someone is. They'll ask what year they graduated from high school, or what year they graduated from college. And, again, if you feel like if you're asking questions that are gaming the system, don't ask them. Like, don't do it. Don't set yourself up. All right. So let's talk for a little bit about our things to do here. So this 1, 2, 3, 4 action roadmap. Here's what it is. It's one thing to do today. It's 2 things to do in the next week. It's 3 things to do this month, but it's the 29th of July. So really, I mean, in the next 30 days. And it's 4 things to do this quarter. And, for those of you who don't feel particularly corporate, like this quarter means a 3-month period. So we're kind of in the middle of a business quarter right now. Most businesses, their quarter right now is quarter 3. It's July to September. But just think of things to do this quarter as in the next 3 months. All right. Let's go through the things that I recommend you do in the order you do them in terms of like planning out this hiring process for yourself, especially if your timeline is by the end of the year. Okay. Here we go. The thing to do today, or the thing to do, overnight, wake up, sleep on it, is decide whether hiring is your right solution. Hopefully, I've given you enough kind of guidance that you'll be able to get to that answer today or after you sleep on it, okay? And real quick, I see someone's asking about where to go. If you're outside of PA, if you're in Chester County, your local SBDC is the Widener SBDC, as John has posted very helpfully. All right, so today you're going to figure out whether you're going to hire, if your problem is really one that requires an employee, okay? And the guidebook I'm going to give you will give you some help on that. Your things to do next week. I have a hiring readiness assessment in the workbook I'm going to give you. That'll go out to you tomorrow. I'll get it shared in the chat here before we leave. I want you to do that. So you'll make your decision, and the hiring readiness assessment is a tool for confirming your decision is correct. Then I want you next week, if you are moving forward with hiring, to define your position, okay? And our workbook, again, has a helpful tool for doing that. When you define the position, that means you're going to set out those core responsibilities, the schedule, who's going to supervise, what success for a new hire is going to look like at 30, 60, and 90 days. And a defined position is different from a wish list, right? This isn't all the things you wish could be taken off your plate. This is what you clearly want to have taken off your plate, what you clearly can give someone instruction on how to do successfully, what you have processes in place for already. And as part of that defining the position, in the workbook, there's a very simple, non-scientific, not necessarily rigorously legal checklist for helping you decide if what position you're looking for is really an employee or if it might be a contractor. And if it might be a contractor, then I'm going to encourage you to reach out and consult with somebody about that before you move forward. Because if you want to consider hiring a contractor, you want to make sure that you're above the board with that. Okay. Let's talk about our 3 things in the next month. Once you've got that definition of the role, then you're going to write the job description. Remember that writing that job description is going to tell applicants the purpose of the role, what the key responsibilities are. You should have already defined those things. May tell them a little bit about what your company does, so they just understand sort of your company, your values. You could tell them a little bit about you if you want, especially if you're like the only other employee, which is going to be the case for most of you. And then the additional things you need to add are really, what are the required qualifications? What are the preferred qualifications? What's the schedule? What's the location where they're going to work? And what's the compensation range? And again, I really want to stress including the compensation range if you can. You could also, and this is optional, think about describing why a strong candidate would want the role, or what kind of future opportunities may exist with the role, okay? And it should be clear enough at the end of reading your job description, a candidate can decide whether the job fits for them, whether the pay, the schedule, the location works for them. All right. And then also in the next month, I want you to choose your recruiting sources. So a first-time employer often assumes the only option is like a job board, or posting on Craigslist or posting on Indeed or posting on LinkedIn. There are lots of different ways to find employees. And so I'll just list a couple of these off. They're also on the workbook sheet, but you can get referrals from customers or from your network. You can have vendors refer people, or you could have a vendor who's working for you doing something who'd like to have become an employee. You can reach out to community organizations. You can talk to schools, churches, rec centers, libraries. You can post up flyers. You can post on PA Career Link, right? There are lots and lots of places, social media also, and then things like Indeed, Monster, LinkedIn are places to post for particular roles, okay? You want to think about kind of the role you're posting for and where it's going to make the most sense. And then the third thing I want you to do in this next month, once you have the job posted up, you're going to have some period of time where you're just accepting resumes, confirming you received them, not doing interviews yet. Develop your interview questions, run them past somebody, come up with a good set of first round interview questions, things that are about like their basic qualifications, whether the schedule works for them, their interests, their understanding of the role, and then come up with those final interview questions, some stuff that goes to problem solving or role specific scenarios, role plays, okay? And the real thing to ask yourself when you're doing recruiting sources is like, where is a strong candidate most likely to hear about the opportunity, all right? And then once you've got all that together, focus on these things for the next 3 months. And that's going to be effectively, once you've figured out where you're recruiting from, effectively recruiting, getting enough people to apply that you have multiple folks who you think would be good for the job that you can talk to, and a few of them that you can move forward, so that you can then ultimately conduct interviews following a plan you created earlier, first and second round, ideally. If you're hiring by yourself and you get to a second round, another thing you can do is if you have someone you trust, like for their ability to read people or because they're a mentor to you, they're willing to come and sit in on the final interviews. It's a really great way to just get a little more perspective. People are going to catch things you maybe not see, all right? Once you're done with interviews, you got to select an employee. In the workbook, I have some things to help you select an employee, and I have some stuff to sort of help you determine how to make an offer. Again, offers are very specific to this particular business, the particular role, the particular person. And so having an SBDC consultant who you can talk through that with, or another mentor or advisor, is a really great thing, okay? Some job boards are free. A lot of them do charge. I do think it's worth paying a small amount of money to get a hire right. And I'll say something about that, hopefully, if I have a minute or three at the end. Actually, I'll just say it now. There's a widely cited, but kind of maybe not real statistic that when you have a bad hire in a position, the cost to the business in terms of actual cash that they spend on the hire, time and money kind of effort that they spend training that person, and then lost profit or customer dissatisfaction from a bad employee often equals about 30% of what you would pay that employee in the first year. So, if you are weighing the difference between I can post here for free, but I might not get good people, and it's costing me $100 to post this job for a week. If you're hiring someone full time, the average salary in Philly, for a lot of entry-level positions can be between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. So a bad hire could cost you somewhere in the order of $15,000. So it's worth spending some money to make sure that you do a good job hiring, okay? And then the last thing, again, this assumes that you maybe complete this hire by the end of the next 3 months, if that's your timeline. Make sure that in this quarter, you also prepare for day one, okay? So briefly here, complete your action plan. You don't have to do this on your own. We've drafted a workbook for you, okay? And it's just going to take me 1 second here, but I am going to actually share this workbook with you. Give me just 1 moment. I have to go and find it and drop it into the chat here. You're going to get this tomorrow as well, just to be clear. Oh, you know what? I'm really sorry. I take that back. I'm not going to share this work with you right at this moment, but I will talk you through it a little bit, okay? So the purpose of the workbook, it's over 10 pages and it's 6 sections. It's really supposed to help you support all of these things, right? So inside the workbook, we're going to give you a sheet to fill out that you'll take away with you. That's a hiring readiness thing. We're going to give you a workbook page to fill out that is about position design and one that's about creating a job description. We're going to give you a workbook page to think through where and how you're going to recruit, for how long you're going to accept applications, if you're going to do that on a rolling basis, okay? We'll give you something to help you think about interviewing. Now, this doesn't go particularly deep, and it doesn't have like a helpful rubric for you to determine if your questions are legal or not, but it's something to get you started. And so it's there so you can at least come to a consultant and ask for help and bring them something that you've kind of started already, right? So that interviewing worksheets and the worksheets for interviewing, I think, are a really helpful jumping off point for beginning to get that right, but they are not the full story. You got to find someone to give you some advice. You got to get someone ideally to confirm that what you're doing is all above the board. And then there's a worksheet there to help you with your selection, evaluating the candidates when you interview them, evaluating the final candidates after the final interviews, figuring out what you're going to offer to somebody, okay? Again, I was unable to drop this into the chat for you. There's something, unfortunately, that I didn't quite set up right with this meeting, and I do apologize for that. I was going to give you a few minutes to look at it and ask questions. But because we've actually run a little longer in the front half of things too, I think that's going to be a little difficult for us. So what I'm going to do for a second here is I'm actually going to stop sharing this screen, and I will open up and just walk you through the workbook before you get to it in person. Give me just one moment here. So you should now see, this is the PDF of the workbook. The first page is a cover. There's a very short direction about how to use it. And then you get into the actual tools. So here's a very simple hiring readiness assessment that you can use to think through that question in more detail. I encourage you to use that. We're going to get that tomorrow as your one step to do within a day. Then we have this nice position design worksheet. This helps you determine that question of employer versus contractor. What's the business need you're trying to solve? What responsibilities you want this employee to handle? Whether those responsibilities are going to directly lead to more money or indirectly lead to more money for the business. What kind of essential responsibilities are they going to have? What do they need to learn over time? What are their schedule? How many hours do you need them? How are you going to supervise them? And what does success look like at 30, 60, and 90 days? From that, you'll be able to build this job description, okay? And this just has the list of questions you want to fill out. There's not a lot of space here. Your answers may be longer than a line. I want to be clear about that. Then there's a section here for your recruiting plan. All these different places you might consider recruiting from. Which methods are you going to select? When are you going to post, and when are you going to take those postings down? Or when are they automatically going to come down, right? What's your application timeline? And what forms of application are you going to take? What information do you want to collect? What custom questions are you going to have? And then there are some screening criteria. So, you will have like a very simple kind of thing here, and you can make a more advanced version of this one-on-one with a consultant if you want. It'll help you narrow down how many finalists. It'll also help you figure out how many interviews to conduct based on the number of finalists you want. And usually 2 or 3 finalists is all you need. Then we'll have an interview planning guide, reminder of things not to ask, information you want to verify, then some open-ended questions and some role play exercises for a final interview. Our last worksheet is about evaluating candidates and offering a job. So there's a little scorecard here to help you just think through whether someone is good in a first round, whether someone is good in a final round, writing out your preferred candidate and why, your alternate candidate and why. It is important to have an alternate candidate, You don't want to let everybody know they didn't get the job and just go to your first candidate and offer them the job. You want to go to your first candidate and offer them the job. Hold your alternate candidate. Don't tell them anything yet until you know that the preferred candidate is accepted. Because you don't want to go back to someone and say, hey, we didn't want you, but actually now we do. And then there's some stuff here where you can indicate sort of like what your salary or wage range you'd like to do is, where you think a candidate lands, what you'd like to offer them, and your reasoning. All right. Hopefully helpful. Again, really meant to spark your thinking more than anything. So right now, I want to thank you all for being part of the workshop today. I want to acknowledge that my very capable student worker friends here, Brandon and William, have been helping me behind the scenes with this workshop today. And they've been posting a link to our feedback form, which I would love for each of you to complete before you head out today. I'm going to post it myself right now one more time. I haven't looked at the Q&A as we've been going along, but I'm going to take a peek at that now. It looks like nobody posted through the Q&A. That's fine. We had a really healthy chat throughout. But I actually am done about 5 minutes early for you. I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that you will join us in September when we're going to continue rolling out the rough draft of this program. And I definitely encourage, like, when you get this feedback, when you get the form, the workbook tomorrow, if you have comments on it, please reach out. Let me know. Let the SBDC know what is helpful and not helpful about this, or how you think could be improved, because it is my intention that this is a draft, and we do want to hear from you and learn and revise before we finalize what we're going to be giving out to people going forward. And in the future, if I have a final version of this, I will go back and find all of you who were the guinea pigs today and get you an updated version of it. But it's been a pleasure spending lunch for many of us, I'm sure, with you talking about this. And I'll be happy to stick around for 5 more minutes right now and answer any other questions that you may have in the chat. I'll give one last plug as well. If you give me just 1 second. It is budget season, and the free workshop that you attended today is made possible in part by grant funding from the federal government. I'm dropping an extra link in here to a system called Voter Voice. If you have a minute, and I really do mean a minute, you'll click this link and it'll ask you to put in your name and address, and you can automatically send letters to your senators and representatives, encouraging them to support the SBDC. I know that's a hard plug for our work and my work. I always tell people, our jobs don't exist without your needing help, but we can't help you for free without the government giving us money to do that. So if you have a minute also, after you've filled out that survey, which is number one for me, that second voter voice link that I posted, I would love to see you click on that, put in your name and address. If you want to add a sentence about how helpful a hiring workshop was, you can do that, but you don't have to. And you can send that within 2 to 3 minutes if you go to that link. All right. What email or what questions do folks have for me? Are any of the jobs boards mentioned free to use? There are versions of job boards that are free to use, John. The rules and the payment methods and the pricing schemes on all these job sites are changing all the time. But I would tell you, look at options. Indeed often has offers they're offering. ZipRecruiter often has offers they're offering. LinkedIn often has offers they're offering where you can post a job to try it out. Some of the more trade-specific sites or like industry groups that are local to Philadelphia have job boards. They do usually charge something to post there. But think about the quality of the candidates you'd get if you post on a specific job board for the industry you're trying to hire in, right? That's, I think, something that's worth the extra cost. Is it a risk to hire an international student which is in the OPT? Thori, could you just tell me, I don't know what OPT stands for. But if you could determine that, I could give you a little guidance just about generally a level of risk. If you want to specifically, okay, optical practical training. I'm going to tell you, Thori, that it would be good to consult a lawyer about that because the immigration situation in this country at the moment is complex and changing rapidly. So, I'm sorry I can't give you a better answer, and I am absolutely hiding behind I'm not a lawyer. I will admit that. Danny asks, I'm struggling with determining how much I can afford to pay an employee, especially since the hire will directly help increase revenue. Well, Danny, I'd love to have a longer term conversation. And if you want to reach out and see about scheduling some one-on-one time with a consultant, they'd probably be happy to talk to you about that too. Really, they're going to want to look at your cash flow of your business. How much money do you have left over at the end of each month? Because at least initially, you probably want to hire somebody who you can pay them just out of the revenues you have at the moment. A good approach to paying someone and allowing their revenue to grow if they do what you ask, which is increased revenue, is to set a job up as a sales position, which is what it sounds like you're hiring for. Hire someone in a sales position with a base salary and a commission, right? Where you price their commission into the cost of your product. And if they go out This is often the case. Business owners will get salty because they'll say, "Oh my God, I hired this sales guy, and now he makes more than I do." And my response to them often is, "Well, depending on how you set that commission up, that probably means your business is making a lot more money." So if you set your commission structure up right and you end up with a job where you've got salespeople who are making more than you, that means your business is really taking off, or you've really screwed up your compensation structure. But there's a way that business owners should never be unhappy if they hire a salesperson who suddenly starts making a lot of money, especially if they're straight commission, because it means they're bringing in a lot of revenue. I will just take a minute to agree with John. Go Sixers. Kimberly Blue, you wrote student/intern hires. Could you be a little more specific about what your question is there? And I'll also acknowledge it is now 1:30. Anybody who needs to go, please feel free to go. Anybody who wants to stay, please feel free to hang out. I got another 5 or 10. Yeah, Kimberly, if you could just tell about them. Oh, sure. Well, a student or an intern hire, there are kind of two components to this. So one is technically, for an intern to be hired, if you want to do that in a really compliant way, you're going to be probably arranging that directly with a school or a university or some kind of a program. And that program may potentially be paying that student in some other way, right? You get into trouble if you have someone working for you for no pay, and they aren't receiving something like college or high school credit or like apprenticeship program credit. So what I'd encourage you to do if you're looking for students or interns, I would go and reach out to the career services departments at colleges and ask if they have an internship program that you as a small business could be a part of, and what the requirements are on your end and what they provide on theirs. Another thing that I would tell you is a lot of internships now try to pay interns at least the minimum wage. All right, Yu Yi, do you know of any specific resources for early childhood talent hires, such as a preschool director, lead teachers? Yeah, there's a huge daycare and pre-K crisis in this country. There are not enough places that provide it. There's nobody that can afford it. The economics of it are difficult in terms of reimbursement rates with states, and finding and keeping people is tough. This is really going to be a specific question that you're going to want to meet with an SBDC consultant about. And I will tell you, Yu Yi, that statewide, there is actually a daycare pre-K center of excellence in Pennsylvania. It's not based out of Philadelphia, but the Philadelphia office can refer you to those people. And we have a couple of small business consultants who specifically have actually run or worked in daycare and preschool programs before and would probably have really concrete advice for you. I would encourage you to look at, depending on the level of skill and certification you need, going and connecting with colleges or community colleges, if people with an associate's degree work for some of those roles for you, connecting with those schools of like education or colleges and universities that offer early childhood education degrees. If you're able to hire people while they're still in school, maybe, or right as they're coming out of school, that's probably going to be a good way for you, especially like for getting people early. And then I see Deb has some advice for Danny about how he might want a contractor instead of an employee. All right, I have time for one last question if somebody wants to ask one, and then I will bid you all adieu and wish you a very happy rest of your day. And I'll give it a minute. All right, well, everyone, thank you so much for being here today. Before I go, I will drop 2 links one final time in the chat. The first is the feedback form. If you didn't get a chance to do the feedback form, please click that first link. And the second, which I'll drop at the end of this sentence, is the voter voice, the outreach to your legislatures form. If you have a minute to do that for us, we'd be very appreciative. There those both are. And with that, it was great spending some time with you here today. I hope this was useful, and I look forward to working hopefully with some of you in the future or seeing you at a future workshop in this series. Have a great day.